We have a special guest on the show today, and Tyler Redmond of Braves on Deck, coming to talk everything Atlanta Braves. What's going on in spring training? Who's going to win these roster battles? And what are some predictions for the upcoming season? We'll discuss all that today with Tyler on this episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure you check out the podcast at Locked On_Braves. Subscribe to us if you are new on YouTube. We're on the road to 10K by opening day, a little over 9,300 subscribers right now. So please, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. You can help me get there by hitting that thumbs up button as well on this video. If you're listening on the audio version, make sure you leave me a 5-star review there to help support the show as well. Thank you to all my everydayers out there and everyone supporting the show here at Locked On Braves. And I've listened to some of your feedback. Some of you want to know why I don't have more guests on. Well, that's changing today. We got Tyler Redmond joining me on the show today. So excited to have a conversation with him about the upcoming season. Before we do that, though, I want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. All right, I'm going to bring in Tyler to the show here. Tyler, thank you so much for joining. Tyler, host of Braves on Deck on YouTube, also sports anchor for WRBL News 3, sports covering the Chattahoochee Valley. Follow him on Twitter at Tyler Redmond TV. And Tyler, I told you before we got recording here, I asked people who do they want on the podcast, and you were the name that came up multiple times. So I'm so glad we're able to have you on.
Well, man, I'm glad people want to hear from me. You know, that's always a nice thing. But yeah, I was following along. I saw the comments as well, and always appreciate being noticed. But when you randomly go down your Twitter feed and you see people are commenting, "Hey, we want Tyler on the show," it's like, well, what show are we talking about? And then I saw it was yours. And I was like, absolutely, I'll be glad to. So thank you for reaching out. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully do this a lot more. Have you and others on here as well to talk about the Atlanta Braves, because who wouldn't want to talk about this Atlanta Braves team? It is. I heard Eric O'Flaherty talk about it on the broadcast on Tuesday. I'm recording this Tuesday night, by the way. It's going to come out on Thursday. But I heard Eric O'Flaherty talking about it on the broadcast that he thinks this is the best roster that the Braves have assembled since he can remember watching the Braves. And it's hard to disagree with that, Tyler. I think you look at this roster top to bottom. And I did a show on Tuesday night looking at the strengths and weaknesses of this team. And I said then I'm having trouble finding weaknesses for this team. I mean, that offense is deadly top to bottom. The rotation has some injury risk, but if everybody's healthy, I mean, it's hard to say it can't be one of the best rotations in baseball. And that bullpen is so deep. So I know you're a longtime Braves fan. We were talking before we got going here. You've seen a lot of good Braves teams come through. Would you agree with Eric O'Flaherty? Is this one of the better Braves rosters you can ever remember being assembled?
I mean, the past few years have really been some of the best baseball that the Braves have had in a very long time, at least. I would argue it's the best team ever assembled, not only this season, but hard to argue with last season. The offensive numbers that we put up and, the fact that our starting pitching was able to navigate a season where you lost Kyle Wright. You didn't have Max Fried for the majority of the season. The fact that you were able to navigate that shows how strong not only your best are, but also the back end of the rotation is as well. And the lineup, put up historic numbers. Ronald Acuna Jr., obviously, MVP season, brought back stolen bases to being a fundamental part of the game in a way. Matt Olson, Austin Riley, top to bottom, this lineup is really stellar because even in the bottom of the order, you have guys like Michael Harris, Orlando Arcia, now Jared Kelenic, replacing Eddie Rosario in a large way. I really think this lineup this season has the potential to maybe not repeat what we saw last year, but put up similar numbers because just like last year, there's not going to be, like you said, there's not going to be an easy out. And depending on the way the lineup is structured, I think you could see better years out of some guys. I think, Snit mentioned the other day that Orlando Arcia very well, Jared Kelenic may hit ninth. Mm-hmm. if he does that and has Ronald Acuna Jr. hitting behind him, I mean, that guy's going to have a breakout year. And we saw that with Orlando Arcia. We saw it with Michael Harris as well. That 9-hole can be a fundamental spot for these guys to get in there, get their feet wet a little bit, and then all of a sudden break out. So I'm excited about this team. I'm excited about Ronald Acuna. Hopefully he's healthy by opening day. But I'm really excited to see Jarred Kelenic. I'm curious to see how he will impact the lineup.
Yeah, and I've talked about the fact of him hitting in that 9-hole as well. And I think that's where he needs to be. I know some people have said, Michael Harris is so good there, leave him there. But I think Michael Harris has graduated from that now. I think he's established himself as a legitimate big leaguer that needs to probably hit towards the top of the lineup. I mean, you saw when Ronald went down in spring training, you immediately moved Michael Harris up to the leadoff spot. And I think he's to the point now, I don't know that he needs that protection of Ronald Acuna Jr. in the lineup. I think he can stand on his own, but I am very curious to see what Jarred Kelenic looks like in that 9 spot ahead of Acuna, which, like you said, it's helped Orlando Arcia. It has helped Michael Harris. It's helped Vaughn Grissom. Pretty much anybody who's been in that 9-hole ahead of Ronald Acuna Jr. the last couple of years has gone on to have a really good season. So hopefully that can be the same for Jarred Kelenic and get him going. But it's been a bit of a slow start to spring training for him. Not that I really want to focus too much on that, but I did want to just ask you early on in spring training here, what have been some things that have maybe stood out to you the most that you've recognized so far, whether it's, Strider's new pitch, getting to see Chris Sale, maybe it is Jarred Kelenic. What so far to you in spring training that has really caught your eye?
Well, I always try to stress to people, don't always look at the numbers and use them as gospel going into opening day, because I always look back at Ender Inciarte. Ender rarely had a good spring training, arguably never had a good spring training. By the season start, when the weather started heating up, he turned out fine. So I always try to stress that to people. But the things that are catching my eyes, I knew going into the season, the lineup is all but set. Your starting rotation is set. Your bullpen and your bench were going to be the two that were being competed over. And when we first started the spring training, Forrest Wall comes out with a 2-3 run homer game. That was intriguing. So really, for me, the most intriguing thing is that competition. Who's it going to be? Because even in the starting rotation, I would put money on that Bryce Elder is going to be your number 5 starter. But you also have AJ Smith-Shawver, who cannot be overlooked. We saw, I think it was yesterday, a lot of cuts to AAA were made, including Darius Vines, Ian Anderson, a lot of your starting pitching possibilities that you kind of already knew were going to be AAA. But AJ Smith-Shawver, I think, has a real chance to break it into the starting rotation. And I also look back to last year. Bryce Elder didn't have a terrific spring training last year. Dylan Dodd and Jared Schuster were the ones that were fighting for that 5th spot. Bryce Elder broke out later. So it can really go either way. I think AJ Smith-Shawver showed a lot last year as to why he got the hype that he did. And I think he's continuing to show that in spring training. But you brought up Strider's new pitch. I'm really intrigued by that. I did a whole video just on that.
I saw that. Yeah.
And that is one that I think could really develop him further, because Strider's been dominant with primarily only using 2 pitches. You add another pitch with that kind of drop in it that looks the same coming out of the hand as the fastball, that has that same tunnel. That guy could be dominant for years to come. Plus, if he doesn't always have to use that fastball, could save his arm a little bit. So I'm intrigued by that a lot. I think the starting rotation and your bullpen are going to be the 2 biggest talking points going forward in spring training. And of course, Acuna's health. But I think that's a moot point at this point. I think Acuna, I think we're all pretty confident if he's not ready by opening day, he will be shortly thereafter.
Yeah, he himself said he would play today, as we're talking on Tuesday, said he'd be ready to go, and I'm sure he would be, but no sense in it right now, no sense in pushing it. Keep him healthy and get him ready for opening day. I want to touch on a couple of things that you mentioned. First of all, the starting rotation. I think Bryce Elder will get plenty of starts this year. I think they're going to give Ronaldo Lopez the first shot just because they're already stretching him out. They're most likely at least going to give him the first crack at it. And if it doesn't work out, move him back to the bullpen and move Bryce Elder in there. But good point on AJ Smith-Shawver, because he's been impressive with that changeup. Look, I I still think the command, obviously, of the curveball and even the slider, just with a little bit I've seen him throw it in spring training, doesn't quite have the command of that. But that changeup has just been devastating, and it's a pitch that he really hasn't thrown much. And if that becomes a real weapon for him, and then you do have the big fastball and he can command that slider, I mean, you're looking at a top of the rotation pitcher like many of us thought he could be. So I think that is one to watch. I don't know that he'll get that fifth starter's job out of spring training, but he is certainly has opened a lot of eyes. I also want to touch on the Forrest Wall note, like you mentioned. He's been very impressive in spring training. Look, I tend to take more consideration of pitchers in spring trainings than I do hitters. But one thing I'll say about Forrest Wall, on the game on Tuesday, he hits the ball into the right center field gap. He starts to round first base like he's going to go. Don't know if he was actually going to or not, but it made the right fielder rush his throw in. He bobbled it. Not only did Forrest Wall get second, he took third too. And that's just a difference maker type of play that I think Forrest Wall can have and make with his speed. The question, though, Tyler, and the issue the Braves have, everybody's going to start. So you put Forrest Wall on the bench or JP Martinez or Eli White or Jordan Luplow, they're not going to play a lot. And do you want to hold back those guys' development by putting them on the bench when you know they're not going to play for sometimes weeks at a time? So that's, I think, the decision that Alex Anthopoulos, Brian Snitker, and the Braves have to make right now. But I have been really impressed with Forrest Wall and the spring that he's had. Next, I want to turn our attention towards the 2024 season, talk a little bit about that and what we are most excited to see. We'll get into that discussion here next. Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experience with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball, I know that's what you're watching, or you're getting ready for March Madness, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That also includes all of us here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep you up to date on all the latest in the world of sports. Like I said, March Madness, NBA, Major League Baseball, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. It is great. And like I said, you get to see more of me over there as well. To learn more, visit amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now, as I just mentioned, it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. And what's coming up this week on the podcast? Well, we'll have a pre-recorded mailbag episode on Fridays. I'll be out of town this weekend. And then on Monday, I'm going to tell you 5 prospects that are most likely to be traded this year. And we'll catch up on all the spring training action from the weekend. All right, Tyler, let's jump it back into our conversation here. Before we get into 2024, let's rewind just a minute. What did you think about the offseason? It was an interesting offseason for the Atlanta Braves. Alex Anthopoulos, a lot of maneuvering, really, to get Jared Kelenic and Chris Sale essentially were some of the bigger moves. Also some free agent signings in the bullpen, going to get an Aaron Bummer, signing a guy, bringing back guys like Joe Jimenez and Pierce Johnson. But overall, what did you think of this offseason for the Braves?
Well, when I look at the offseason, going into it, we knew a couple of things. We knew Vaughn Grissom probably was going to be traded during the offseason. We also knew that the bullpen needed more left-handers. We knew that we had a lot of, in the minor league system, we had a lot of names that had been there for a long time. And what I mean by that is they weren't coming up to the majors, or they at least weren't part of the plan, and they couldn't stay in the minors much longer without interfering with other development. So I knew that there would be some trades. I did not expect so many to be traded, I guess, in such a short period of time, because I think, kind Kyle Wright got traded, that one surprised me in a way. It just kind of took me off guard. It's not one that I expected to go that way. But when you think about it, Kyle Wright got traded for a pitcher who I believe landed us Aaron Bummer later on. So I looked at the offseason, Aaron Bummer, I think we traded 6 players for just Aaron Bummer. But they were players that had a lot of name value, but they weren't exactly giving a lot of value on the field anymore. I believe it was like Colby Allard, Michael Soroka, guys who had been down in the minors and just hadn't quite found it. Those were the guys that ended up being traded. And I thought it was a good move. My brother, I always give him credit for this because he called it last year. He wanted the Braves to trade for Aaron Bummer, and he was preaching it to me. And we'll see how it goes this year. But when it happened, it was, well, Jacob, you got it, right? But Aaron Bummer is a guy who was on one of the worst defensive teams in baseball in the Chicago White Sox. He's a guy who I think if you put him, the grass is always greener, but you put him in a better team and a better situation, I think he's a guy that could succeed. So I was happy with that move. I was happy we added left-handed pitching in the bullpen. I thought we needed that desperately last year. AJ Minter was one of our few guys that we had. But beyond that, everybody's always wanting the big move. Hey, go get a Blake Snell. Go get, Josh Hader. Go get somebody that's, I hate to say name value, but name value. And with name value comes a high cost. I did not think that was going to happen. I always thought, look a little bit more modest. And I thought Chris Sale was a perfect fit for what Alex Anthopoulos historically has done. He's never gone for the obvious, yep, we're going to sign, Blake Snell, or we're going to sign somebody of that stature and pay. He went a little under the radar, and that's more along the lines of what Alex Anthopoulos is known to do. I thought getting Chris Sale for Vaughn Grissom was perfect because it solved 2 needs. It solved the needs for the Red Sox, and it solved the needs for the Braves because Chris Sale, when he's healthy, is dominant. And so far in spring training, he's been very good. And do you know if Chris Sale is going to be healthy this year? We don't. But if he is, and all indications are that he will be, this is his first healthy offseason in 6 years, I mean, the guy could be a front-of-the-line starter, and he was that not that long ago. I think that's the best move of this offseason. I think that's obvious, but I like it a lot. I think the starting rotation also, you look ahead, and I know this is looking way ahead. Max Fried's a free agent at the end of the year. You had to get someone, and Charlie Morton is also could be gone at the end of this year. We don't know. So to me, you had to get someone to not only be here this year, but you needed to extend him. You needed to have someone here over the next couple of years to kind of help with that transition, possibly, of either losing just Charlie Morton or both Morton and Fried. So I think that's part of it. I think, when you look at the ins and outs of it, Chris Sale, I saw a video you did the other day, Jake, where you were talking about the Phillies had our number. And I think a large part of that is we haven't had the right energy going into the postseason. I think Chris Sale has the Jock Peterson effect in a lot of ways. I think he has that chip on his shoulder, right attitude at the right time. And I think we'll see that hopefully in October. But I like that move a lot. I think it's the biggest move of the offseason, and I think it's going to pay a lot of dividends.
No, I would agree with that. I think the Chris Sale move is the one for me this offseason. It's the one I don't think anybody really saw coming. I want to say that I had at least somebody, and I'm sure out of all the suggestions that were sent to me this offseason, somebody probably said Chris Sale along the way, but I certainly didn't give it much thought. Somebody that hasn't pitched a lot recently, somebody who had a pretty big price tag in terms of dollars and didn't have a lot of control at the time. It just didn't seem all that likely, but you're right. The move to deal Vaughn Grissom for him, and unfortunately Vaughn Grissom now injured, is going to miss opening day. Really hate that for him. Hopefully he'll be back soon and able to take that second base job there. But to get a guy like Chris Sale, and you talk about the attitude that he has in a good way, I believe, and just the fire that he brings, I don't know if that was baked into the decision for Alex Anthopoulos, but I mean, how much have you already heard going from, FanFest into spring training? You've heard other players talk about Chris Sale and his attitude and his desire to compete and to win. it seems like almost everybody has had a comment about that with Chris Sale, and I think that is needed. Look, he's got to be healthy, I think, in order to be able to give off that vibe and that attitude. I don't know that you can do that if you're not actually in the trenches with the team battling. So he needs to stay healthy, and I'm curious to see how the Braves kind of manage his workload throughout the year. But if he is healthy, I think and I've said it multiple times, I think he will be a top of the rotation type of arm. I think even if you look at the metrics from last year when he pitched, and they show you that he still has dominant type stuff. And you've seen in spring training, he's already up, to 97, and the slider's just absolutely ridiculous. And he's able to paint with it on both corners. I mean, he can be really, really good and be a huge difference maker. You talked about the note with the Phillies and them having the Braves number, maybe partially because the Braves just haven't had that fire after being off for 5 days or whatever going into a series. Also, they got some really good lefties at the top of their order, and the Braves go out and get another lefty starter in Chris Sale. They go out and get Aaron Bummer, who you also mentioned. So the moves this offseason seem to be very targeted in the type of player that Alex Anthopoulos brought in. For Jared Kelenic, a lot of maneuvering was made to get him. I wonder if it's just let's hope this kid figures it out, a one-stop prospect. Let's hope he finally clicks, or if they actually saw something that they can unlock with him. And I hope that's the case. I mean, they did a lot of maneuvering in order to acquire him. And I hope it is because they saw something in him they think that can be unlocked. All of that said, and we talked about at the top just how deep this team is. Tyler, I want to ask you, because I talked about it on Tuesday's podcast, if there is one thing that concerns you with this Braves team, outside of obviously some injury risk, particularly in the starting rotation, is there anything else that you can really see with this team that gives you cause for concern? Obviously, the season will unfold and things can happen, but right now going in, is there something else that just really concerns you?
There's nothing that drastically concerns me. I think the lineup is great. I think your starting pitching is great. I think your bullpen is great. You mentioned the possibility of injuries. You can't plan for that. I think, on paper, we're going to be great. However, something that has been brought to my attention a couple of times over the past few months, I guess, was the loss of Ron Washington and Eric Young. It's going to be interesting to watch that dynamic, because I'll tell you, I've met Ron Washington. I've seen him in action. I've seen it up close and personal, the relationship he had with not only Ozzie Albies, but every infielder, every outfielder, did not matter. And EY was the same way. I think they were a big part of the culture. And it's going to be interesting to watch and see if the leaders of the team, your Acuñas, your Austin Rileys, your Matt Olsons, it's going to be interesting to watch if they're able to carry that culture on with Matt Tuiasosopo and the new first base coach as well. And I really think that is something that, again, it doesn't overly concern me. I'm not losing sleep at night with it. But I definitely think that loss is going to be felt this season. And it's going to be hard not to. I mean, it's big shoes to fill. They don't give managerial jobs to just anybody. Ron Washington deserved it, earned it, and got it. And I'm happy for him, don't get me wrong, but I hate to see him leave Atlanta. I hate to see it. I'm curious to see how that dynamic unfolds.
Yeah, that's one of the things I mentioned in the things to watch for in spring training and really throughout the year. And it's something we as fans outside, viewers, may not be able to completely see, but I am curious what that dynamic looks like and how, him and Goodwin, Tuiasosopo and Goodwin, how they fit into the atmosphere there and the culture there. That is great. And those guys have been in the organization, so I'm sure they understand it, and I'm sure they're going to be great fits. But I mean, just the personalities of Ron Washington and Eric Young, I mean, they were very loud, and the team and the players, really seemed to enjoy being around them. And I'm not saying that, Tuiasosopo and Goodwin have to be that type of personality. I don't think there is a personality like Ron Washington, another one out there. But I am curious. Like you said, maybe not worried. It's not keeping me up at night, but it is something that I wish I can get more insight and hopefully get some, other people like you and others who cover the team and kind of get their insight on the coaches and how they're fitting in. But it is definitely something to keep an eye on this year. All right, we're going to take one more break here and come back. I want to get some of Tyler's projections and predictions for the upcoming season. We'll do all of that here next. Conference tournaments are here, which means the biggest moments in college basketball are getting closer. Be a part of the action on PrizePicks for both men's and women's college basketball. PrizePicks even offers injury insurance so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays alive. Good to know. PrizePicks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. We had tacos on this Tuesday that we're recording. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. They have over-unders on spring training games as well. On Tuesday morning, I fired up the PrizePicks app. They had Spencer Strider at 5.5 strikeouts. So you can go check out spring training over-unders as well on PrizePicks. Obviously, they got NBA stuff out there as well and getting ready for March Madness. It's really simple to play. Just pick 2 to 6 players or a group of 2 to 6 players and decide if you think they will go over or under on certain stats like points, blocks, or assists. If you're into basketball, hits, strikeouts, runs batted in, and more for baseball. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Want to remind you one more time that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now also available on Amazon Fire TV and the Fire TV channels app. All right, Tyler, let's wrap things up here a little bit. Don't know that I'll have you on again before the regular season starts, but definitely want to have you on again at some point. This has been a great discussion, but I want to get your predictions a little bit for the upcoming season. Over under win total for the Braves on FanDuel, one of our other great sponsors, is 101.5. You taking the over? You taking the under?
Tough to take the over on 101. If you said 100, I might do it. I can't say that I would take them over at 101. I mean, it's just a really tough feat to do. Although I didn't expect 100 wins last year. I'm going to take the under just because I think it's more likely to be. But, we'll see how it ends. If they prove me wrong, I'll be just as happy.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about that is, if everybody stays healthy and they play their potential, I think they blow past 100, 101 wins, just like they did last year with 104. Hard to predict that. But one thing I'll say is, if there is a change in mindset a little bit for this Braves team last year where they are so postseason focused, maybe they don't quite go all in on every game in the regular season. They wrap things up a little bit earlier. Maybe we see some guys take a little bit more time off and rest. That obviously could affect their win total a little bit. But, I mean, the team on paper, they're talented enough, obviously, to win more than 102 games, but it's just really hard to predict that's going to happen. Winning 100 games in a season is not an easy feat, and it would be the third time in a row the Braves have done it. All right, what numbers does Ronald get to this year? Obviously, you got a little bit of health scare here in spring training that might, cause some concern for people to maybe hold back. Does he get to 50-50? Does he repeat 40-40? What do you think he gets to this season?
I mean, I don't think it's too out of the realm of possibility to say he gets 50-80. I mean, you talk about a guy who's motivated. He wants to win another MVP. He's already done it once. He's going to want to do it again. And how aggressive he was last year, I think towards the end he got even more aggressive because he saw 40, he saw 70 as a possibility, or 60 even as a possibility. I think he's going to have that aggression all year long. I mean, to me, he's the closest thing to Ricky Henderson since Ricky Henderson. And that's a tough comparison. I'm not saying that he's got the speed like that, but no one else in the game has hit for power and had the speed, or at least the aggressiveness, as Ronald Acuna has in a very long time. And, in terms of another MVP, because that's always one that comes up, can Ronald Acuna Jr. win another MVP? I think he can. I certainly think he can. But it also depends on what everybody else in the league does. Does Mookie Betts have a great season, right? I think back to a couple of years ago when, everybody was arguing over Judge or Ohtani. And Ohtani had just as good of a season as his MVP one the year before, but Judge hit 60-plus homers. And it's a battle. I think Acuna can get to 50-80 if he's fully healthy all year, if he's, as motivated, and if the opportunities present themselves on the base pass. I don't see why 50 homers is going to be an obstacle at all. And I could be wrong. I just think Acuna is so talented in so many different facets of the game. He did something no one ever thought could happen last year in 40-70. If you had told me that at the beginning of the season, I wouldn't have believed it. And I think he's going to want to beat that in both categories this year.
Yeah, he seems to set his own bar and definitely feels like he wants to surpass it. You mentioned the aggressiveness there, 11 home runs in September. Like you said, he saw that goal in sight, and it seemed like he became not even really more aggressive on the base pass. He didn't quite need that. He needed the home runs. And I feel like he changed his launch angle and his swing a little bit to get to those home runs. And if he does that from start to finish, my only worry is that he hits too many home runs and doesn't have as many stolen base opportunities. But obviously the sky the limit for Ronald Acuna Jr. All right, real quick, is Max Fried a Brave beyond 2024? Yes or no?
It's tough to say. I mean, it really is. I'm going to lean no. And the reason I say that, we've seen this time and time again. We've seen it with Freddie. We saw it with even Dansby. When you let a contract get to this point, Chipper said it perfectly a few years ago. You let a player get to free agency and all the pretty girls come out, and start throwing around prices and that kind of thing. It's tough to bring them back. If Max Fried wants to be an Atlanta Brave, he will be. And I think there is a genuine want there for Fried to stay in Atlanta, but he's also from California. The Dodgers, pay more than just about anybody. It just wouldn't overly surprise me if he heads to LA. It just wouldn't. Whether that's with Padres, whether that's with the Dodgers, Angels, I would assume it's the Dodgers. I think he's going out west. And, if that's the case, he's had a great career in Atlanta. I mean, he'll be an Atlanta legend forever just because of Game 6 of the World Series alone. But I'm leaning towards he's going to get his money. And the other reason I say it, Austin Riley locked up, Acuna locked up, Michael Harris locked up. I can go through all of them. Ozzie Albies, they all got locked up early. Max Fried is the one guy who said, nope, I don't want to get locked up. I want to play my contract, and I want to hit free agency. And I think he's going to want to get paid. Now, the other aspect of this is Max Fried the one guy that the Braves go, well, we should pay him. He may be. I would lean no on that as well, though, because it's just not the system they've put in place. And, unless things change, it'd be nice if he was locked up by the All-Star break. But to be honest with you, I've been saying that for the past 2 seasons. Let's lock Fried up. Let's lock him up and have him know he's going to be here. But at the rate we're going, I mentioned this is a reason I think the Braves signed Chris Sale, because they saw this light at the end of the tunnel. Hey, we may not have Fried after this year. So, I'm going with no.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I've kind of been on that train for a while now. Alex Gonzalez is all the extensions he's done. He really hasn't extended a pitcher or signed a free agent pitcher on a long-term deal into their 30s. Spencer Strider obviously was a different case going into his, arbitration years. So it's a riskier deal. All pitchers are risky. And I don't think it's something that the Braves are going to do unless he's going to take a team-friendly deal. And it just doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So enjoy the season with Max Fried. It could be his last in a Braves uniform. And as you said, regardless, he will be a Braves legend alone for what he did in Game 6 of that World Series. Tyler, thanks so much for coming on. I really do appreciate the conversation. Like I said, definitely want to have you on again. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe to Tyler's channel over on YouTube, Braves on Deck. Check him out. Does great work over there, and follow him on Twitter as well at Tyler Redmond TV. All right, make sure you subscribe to us here on YouTube at Locked On Braves, trying to get to 10K by opening day. Follow us on social media at ShortstopBall, at LockedOn_Braves. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.